Join us today for a, I guess, retrospective look at the Star Trek films, primarily the 6 original series films, although I wouldn't be surprised if we would mention some of the others, but we're going to be focusing on the original 6. So on that note, it's probably time to move on to Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, which is an odd name for a series set in space, but we'll move on. So that one had a slightly higher budget of $30 million, but still not very big, which is kind of impressive that they managed to have a couple ship battles in the movie and pretty good effects throughout. I think it looks better than 5 overall. But it also had a box office of $96.8 million. So, the series, went out with a bang, and I think you can tell that I think everyone on board knew this was the last of the, I don't think this was like we're not making money, let's not make anymore. I think it was we've had a good run, this is a fitting conclusion, and as we explain the plot, it'll make sense why here. But you're about to say something there, Jim?
Well, one of the things I was going to say is that I believe this is the one movie where they came up with one of the most reused pieces of Star Trek footage ever, which is the
bird of prey exploding.
The bird of prey exploding, because I
know it's used in Generations,
and it's used in the Next Generation episodes. It's used actually, I think it's used in Generations when they blow up the bird of prey in Generations.
It is, yeah. It's the same shot. It's slightly lightened up a little bit, so the colors of the bird of prey look a little different, but it's the same shot.
Yeah, and there's many times that they've used this. Pretty much any bird of prey exploding is the exact same shot, used over and over again. They got their money worth out of this one shot. But the other thing is that I think the Undiscovered Country is obviously not based on any sort of actual country. It's something. It's breaking new ground.
Was it Kirk's dad that said it? It was someone said it. He described it as the future is the undiscovered country. Essentially, the future is the unknown, unlimited possibility is what it represents. But it was a very terrestrial saying.
So it starts off with that's with the destruction of Praxis, right?
Yes.
Which is a moon of Kronos, isn't it?
Yeah, it's where the Kronos is the Klingon homeworld, and Praxis is where they mine. It's their main dilithium source, and so there's something happens, and Praxis explodes, which releases a tremendous amount of radiation. And given its proximity to Kronos, it's irradiated the planet essentially. So the Klingons realize that they're going to have to evacuate their homeworld, and they can't do it alone, so they have to sue for peace with the Federation and hope the Federation will help them. And so that's what the plot revolves around. That's kind of what I talked about in a little bit of the intro there, because this movie is like the capstone to the original series, essentially. This is the end of the Federation-Klingon conflict. This is how it ends, and how in the Next Generation, which was already going at that time, we see that the Klingons and the Federation are allies, and this is how it happens. And there are forces on both sides, plus the Romulans, who do not want to see that happen. Turns out both sides have a military-industrial complex that would like to keep the war going, and they're perfectly fine working together to fight each other. Or make strange bedfellows, is all I can say. But to my mind, this whole thing was probably, I'm not going to say set in motion, but there's an episode in the original series, I want to say it's called The Squire of Gothos, but I could be wrong on that, where the Klingons have seemingly taken over a world that appears to have like medieval level technology. And so Kirk and Spock sneak down there, and they're trying to like start a rebellion or something against the Klingons, because the whole Klingon Federation conflict is a metaphor for the Cold War. That's important for this whole little story's going. So they go down to the planet, the Klingons capture them, and then the guys that live there basically tell the Klingons and the human and the Federation that no, all this is just a setup. Like, they're powerful energy-based beings, and all this is just to have like a frame of reference so that mortal races can interact with them. And they tell them, and instantly, like once they demonstrate their power, I don't remember which Klingon it was. It's one of the ones in a few episodes, and shows up again in Deep Space Nine. But he instantly turns to Kirk and is like, "Kirk, let's put aside our differences. I think we can take them." And so instantly he realizes the bigger threat, knows the Federation knows how to fight, and is like, "All right, well, this is our only chance." And like I said, war makes strange bedfellows. And the alien tells him, is like, basically kind of like, it's odd that you would do that, because I see in your future that your peoples will stand together one day. And both sides just like, oh, I don't think so. And they use their power to literally like stop the impending war between the Federation of Klingons all across known space. And it ends with the Klingon, Kirk's like, well, I guess the war will have to wait. And the Klingon's like, it would have been a beautiful war, Kirk. We'll see you out there. And I think this is like the culmination of that. It's finally, something happens, the two races can finally bury the hatchet. It's also a metaphor.
You mean bury the batleth?
Yes, bury the batleth. That's much better, Jim. But yeah.
And not into someone's skull.
Well, maybe the wrong ones. They're duplicitous bastards. But, so the movie itself, though, is also a metaphor for the end of the Cold War. Praxis is a metaphor for Chernobyl. The Soviets suffered this massive catastrophic incident in an energy-generating area, and a short time later, they didn't have to sue for peace, but they did allow Westerners in to try to help, and that was the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union. I mean, aside from their terrible economic policies and all the other problems that would eventually come crashing down, but like that was like the moment. And so it ends with, the collapse of the Soviet Union. And at least in the 90s, it kind of looked like we were going to have peace with Russia. We were optimistic fools, but maybe one day. Not today. But so the whole movie is kind of a metaphor for that. And even now, there are people on both sides that want to keep essentially the Cold War going, and would probably ally to do so if they could, or maybe they have. I don't know. But I'm not going down conspiracy theory like that, folks. Just throwing it out there. So the movie's a metaphor for that, and against that backdrop, we see a lot of things. Again, David Warner shows back up as Gorkon, Chancellor Gorkon, ruler of the Klingon Empire. We also have Christopher Plummer as General Chang. For those of you who saw season 3 of Picard, the woman shapeshifter who was after them throughout most of the series, that's Christopher Plummer's daughter. So there's a legacy there. Also, Kim Cattrall plays the Vulcan. Interesting side note, she posed nude for Playboy on the bridge set right around that time too. For those of you who want to know those kind of things. And we also get Christian Slater in a random cameo appearance. Anyone else?
Tuvok, but not Tuvok.
Yeah. Tuvok is not Tuvok.
Even though I think later in Voyager they retconned that it was Tuvok.
Yeah, because Vulcans live a long time.
Yeah, they never explained why even that 20 years.
Then I believe the Federation president is, what's his name that plays Red Foreman? Also the bad guy in RoboCop.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he's the Federation president. So there's several other stars that randomly show up in this one for some reason as opposed to all the others. But Kirk, very much like the whole "hey, the Klingons killed my son" comes back with a vengeance for Kirk in this one. And because Spock, I think it's Spock. It might have been Kim Cattrall's character. I think it's Spock that asks Kirk, well, should they all die for that? And Kirk says, yes, they should. And that's hatred from Kirk's part speaking. And a lot of the movie is him having to accept that, a Klingon killed his son, not every Klingon, and they don't all deserve to die because of it.
But
And again, that comes back to the whole the aging thing, and this is the can you look past old prejudices and move on? Can you accept that maybe you were wrong?
and that moment, because somehow his, in the movie his personal log gets leaked out to the Klingons, and that's where they're like drives the whole plot of the movie. But at the same time, was also one of the biggest reasons why there's something fishy here. It's like, well, how did they get this?
Yeah.
Random.
Yeah, because what happens is Gorkon gets killed. Well, the Enterprise is supposed to escort Gorkon to Earth, I believe, and to start peace talks. And the Klingons come aboard. They have a big state dinner. Everyone drinks the old Romulan ale that's illegal everywhere, and so a lot of truth starts flowing on both sides, and some truth a lot of people don't want to hear. Chang's a big fan of Shakespeare and the original Klingon, apparently, and so then it's after that Kirk's like, basically screw them all, and hope they all die. And then someone beams aboard Gorkon's ship.
Well, so what happens at first is that it appears that the Enterprise fires upon Gorkon's
took out
ship.
gravity.
And then somebody beams aboard wearing
Gravity boots and a Federation suit, but with their helmet, so we can't see them.
Yeah.
And they take out Gorkon and some other members of his cast, of his crew there. And Bones and Kirk beam over to try to help, and Gorkon dies, and they take them prisoner. And
Yeah, poor Bones. He's just there trying to save him. And they're like, "Oh, if you would have only known more about our physiology, you could have saved this man." He's like, I didn't mind.
yeah, so then they get sent to trial with Worf as their attorney. I'm assuming that's like Worf's ancestor, because it can't be actual Worf.
Well, I believe, and I believe that's even mentioned. That it's a
Yeah, but his name is Worf.
Yes. Yes.
And it's played by
Michael Dorn.
Michael Dorn. So. But yeah, so they get found guilty and get sent to the Gulag at Rua Pente, and that's where they meet a changeling, but probably not one of the Deep Space Nine changelings, or maybe it was.
I don't-
It's hard to say.
Because I don't think she turned to goo and had to sleep in a bucket.
Right. Although that was before Deep Space Nine, so right.
Yeah.
Also an alien that keeps his genitals in his knees, apparently.
Yeah.
Bad for him. Good for Kirk.
That seems like a very terrible place. 'Cause
Yes.
If you kneel down for anything, you're crushing your neck.
Yes, you would think so, but
Also, if they give you a D, that's
well.
a little weird.
But yeah, so you see Sulu is now in charge of the Excelsior. He's the captain there, and he's kind of dealing with Spock and like, hey, so if you need anything to rescue the captain, like, I got your back. And they do go rescue the captain, so figure out where he is, because right as he was leaving to get on the turbo lift, Spock slapped something on his back, which you can clearly see in the movie if you don't look for it, and it's a tracking device.
It also makes you wonder though, why would they have never changed their?
Why did they never change their uniforms? Why didn't they put them in like a prison outfit or anything?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're going to go get rescued, and right as they're about to, like, the prison guards apparently are in on the plot, because they're the ones like, well, since you're about to die, I'll tell you everything, and then they get beamed up, and he's like, Spock, damn it, they were going to tell us everything. Like, well, we could send you back. No, forget it. So they piece together that Kim Cattrall's character is in on it, which they're kind of surprised. She's a Vulcan. The Romulan ambassador.
But Vulcans, there's extremist Vulcans, and there's also extremely logical Vulcans who think, well, the Klingons are never going to be someone we can trust.
Yeah.
But it started with the fact that the Klingons had his personal log. That was the start of it. Obviously, tracing back the boots.
Yeah. They as Kirk and Bones are dealing with their the Klingon justice system, the Enterprise is trying to figure out what the hell happened, because as Spock points out, the logs say that they fired the torpedoes, but the torpedoes are still there, right?
Yes.
So either someone did something with the torpedoes or someone changed the logs, but either way, someone on the ship did something. So they know someone on the ship is in on the plot. Plus there's the gravity boots, and because they know they beamed from the Enterprise over there and back. Yeah, they run into a few problems like, well, why wouldn't they just vaporize it? And they're like, well, here's why. And they fire a phaser and it sets off all the alarms, which that's the first time in Star Trek history, and I think the only time that ever happens. Like every other time phasers are being fired on the ship, those alarms would go off.
But you know, plot.
Yeah.
It had to be there. So you had that, and then they find 2 dead crew members that the boots belong to.
Right, and they were killed. So they're like, well, how did they kill them? Like, well, the phaser was set to stun, but it was a point-blank range to the temple, so it was fatal.
So
Because the other way it was set to disintegrate. That's what set off the alarm.
But they were, you know, they got kind of a clever idea. They said, well, let's say that one of these people isn't dead.
Yeah, to draw out whoever killed them. Yeah.
Yes.
Which ended up, what is her name? You know, off the top of your head? Anyway, Spock learns everything by mind building with her because she won't talk. And, yeah, they also figure out that the Klingons have to have a bird of prey that can fire while cloaked, which is a new thing. Up to that point, they had to decloak to fire. And everyone's like, was that possible? And Spock's like, well, I don't remember exactly how he phrased it, but it says, an ancestor of mine posited that once you eliminate the impossible, whatever is left, however improbable, must invariably be the truth. For those of you who don't know that quote, that's from Sherlock Holmes. Spock implying that one of his ancestors was Sherlock Holmes. But, yeah.
Well, human ancestor.
I mean, maybe, you know. But, or at least Arthur Conan Doyle. So, I don't know if he had any kids. Well, he has an estate, so maybe he did. Let's look that up. But yeah, so they deduced that, okay, well, the torpedoes had to come from somewhere. We never detected another ship, so it had to be a cloaked ship that could fire while cloaked. And then Uhura is the one that comes up with the means to track them, which boils down to, well, the thing has to have a tailpipe, because it's got a reactor that has to have emissions of some kind.
And it has to put out a lot of emissions to be able to do what it does. So.
Yeah. So Spock and McCoy jury-rig a torpedo because the Enterprise figures out where the talks are going to be at Camp Kittimer. The Excelsior's flying to meet them there, and of course the Klingons are already there. The Klingons who want to continue the war, because since Gorkon's dead, his daughter takes over, and she is still pushing for peace with the Federation. Even though Chang tried to give her the old, like, you know, your father died, following this train of thought, you might want to reconsider. What she took more is like, no, my father died for this, it's worth fighting for. And of course, I like Mr. Scott at one point, Klingon bitch, she's not even crying. Spock, the Klingons don't have tear ducts, Mr. Scott. So she literally couldn't cry. But, is 6 the one where Scotty just completely gives up hiding the fact he's missing one of his fingers? I know it's one of the movies that he finally just stops. For those who don't know, the guy that plays Scotty, James Doohan, yeah, I don't remember if it's right or his left, but he's missing one of his fingers. And you can never tell in the old series because the way he always held himself and held his arms, but in one of the movies he finally stops hiding it, and you can see it, notice it. But yeah, so they get there, and they've got the Klingon ship keeps hammering them. But then they finally fire the one torpedo, and all throughout this, Chang's just been going on and on and on and Shakespearean, and you know, it's final, like once he fires the torpedo, he finally comes to the to be or not to be, and then as the torpedo's about to hit, not to be.
Because after the first one hits, and they just
they just targeted the explosion. The Enterprise and the Excelsior just hammered it. Well, a bird of prey is a much smaller ship; it can't take a whole hell of a lot of pounding and blows up.
Yeah, I was gonna say in normal combat, I mean, even the Enterprise A would have been a match. The Excelsior would have been overqualified to destroy it.
So yeah, so then they beam down and they stop someone was going to assassinate the Federation president, disguised as a Klingon, but it's actually a human. And is that the guy that the actor that plays Odo played him? Because he plays a Federation guy in these movies too.
That I did not know.
I'll have to look that up, folks, real quick. But anyway, so they stopped the assassination attempt, and it was meant to look like the Klingons assassinated the Federation president to re-spark the war. And like I mentioned earlier, the Romulans were in on it, so the Federation people beamed down like a couple of different groups, and they stopped the Romulan ambassador. They stopped. He's a black guy. I think it was Colonel West, maybe. Is with the Federation military, and he's down there like in the audience, and they know he's part of the plot, so they stop him. And then they go to stop the assassin up in the balcony, and I think Scotty's the one that shoots him.
Shoots him out the window.
Yeah.
Well, while you're looking that up, one thing I was doing some research on it on the Excelsior model.
Valeris is Kim Cattrall's character. It's just a note there.
That according to lore, or I guess now canon, that the Excelsior class was used for over 100 years.
Really?
Yes. I mean, that's why, like in the Next Generation, they're still using the Excelsior class. It's been refit multiple times. That not having to build a new model. Half of the new ships in the Next Generation, Voyager and Deep Space Nine, were all just kit-bashed models of other ships.
And which one? And which one are they kit-bashed?
All the Next Generation, half the ships are just other ships being kit-bashed to make new ships.
Admiral Cartwright is the black guy. I can't think of his name. Brock Peters plays him. I don't see it in here. Maybe I'm wrong.
It's okay to be wrong.
I know, but it's going to help if I just go to the actor instead. Because I know he plays a Federation guy in one of the movies.
But no, I think it was. I think the send-off was good. It was you had some space battles. Again, you get more space battles in Star Trek than you have in the Star Wars movies as of late. You don't understand that whole battling in space. I think it was a good send-off, even though technically, I guess, Generations was the final send-off.
Yeah, I mean, this was the last of the crew all together. I consider this the send-off. But you're right, it's not the last appearance.
Now, do you find it weird, though, that there was that one episode of, like, The Next Generation where they had McCoy in it as, like, 50 years old?
That's the first episode, isn't it?
It's one of them. And, then Generations, you had Kirk, and like I said, a good handful.
Well, I mean, Spock showed up in the Next Generation, but he is a Vulcan. He lives longer. And Scotty was like stuck in the transporter.
I'm like his poor comrade that didn't survive that.
Yeah, I like how in at least from what I've seen so far of Strange New Worlds, the doctor there knows that trick, and his daughter's looped in there. I might have been mistaken. I could have sworn he was in one of the movies. And I'm past where that would have been. Oh well. It happens.
So, any other closing thing? Well, I think just the fact that how long we actually talked about Star Trek 6 versus how much we could find to talk about the fifth one just goes to show that, a good story, having a good story and a good plot and, combination, there's a lot more to talk about versus if you just take a good idea and just write it poorly.
Yeah, I mean, Star Trek 6 is obviously the better movie. Like, there's a lot more to it. And again, it really does feel like the culmination of everything up to that point. You know, it is the end of the war with the Klingons, you know. And that's like the driving plot point of the original series. So
you know, I just realized that technically the next 6 movies lead to the culmination of the peace with the Romulans.
yeah, at the end of Nemesis is when the peace negotiations begin, and then somewhere between there and Picard is where they do finally make peace, and then Spock goes back in time to try to stop the. Well, he doesn't intentionally do it, but you know, to stop the supernova that's somehow going to threaten the galaxy.
No, it just blows up Romulus.
Oh, I know, but like in the movie, they said it was threatening the galaxy, and that was one of those moments where I was like, don't know about that. I don't think that's how that works, but okay, JJ.
And the same thing, like a Romulan mining ship that can take out even a very old Federation fleet.
Well, there's deleted parts. It's been upgraded with Borg technology somehow or another. Is why. And but yeah, kind of like the parts they're taking out where they were also taken prisoner by the Klingons.
Yeah, which would have made a better movie.
Yeah.
It was still a good movie, but yeah, I don't know. We'll have to get into that at some point.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing more there. It'd have to be a series or something at this point, probably. But really change some things. Like I saw some people had some interesting ideas online. Like with the destruction of Vulcan, maybe now the Andorians have a bigger say in the Federation. So that maybe the Federation's more militaristic, not like Mirrorverse, but you know.
What about like the Vengeance?
Yeah, the bigger, blacker, eviler Enterprise. Yeah, I mean, just things like that, you know. And how the third one had that callback to like Enterprise era stuff going on with the ship that was crashed there, and you know, things like that. But to your point, like the events of Nemesis heavily influenced all 3 seasons of Picard. You know, Data dying, the peace with the Romulans, and all that. It all heavily influenced the 3 seasons of Picard. And yeah. So,
we'll have to do a retrospective on those movies at some point as well. I think, kind of in conclusion with the original series movies, the original cast movies, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know. I think they still hold up today. I mean, when we went to go see the Wrath of Khan in theaters,
yeah,
it still holds up. And I don't know. It's just there's a thing in the way that they did filmmaking back then. It seems like the Wrath of Khan will always held up way better than Star Trek Into Darkness.
Well, I think this is just me because I kind of see this with the original trilogy of Star Wars movies too. Now, maybe it's just because I'm used to seeing them that way, and that's what I saw first. But it's because so many of the effects are practical effects, and so they look, for lack of a better word, they look real. Okay. Now there's CGI that looks really damn good out there, but it all has a ticking clock on it because it's always improving, and it still hasn't hit it looks real because it's not real.
Yeah, I mean, good example, Avengers Endgame. I mean, while the fight scene at the very end was awesome, it's going to be dated at some point in the future.
Yeah.
I mean, you could tell everything except for like a couple of people were all not there, just computer generated.
Right, and it's the way I hear a lot of people explain it is that the things appear weightless. You know, they just don't look like they truly occupy a space with real gravity and dimension to them. And you know, I think like the newer Star Wars movies, a lot of that's CGI, but it's really good CGI. Like I despise them plot-wise, but the new Star Wars movies look fantastic, and I have to applaud them for keeping the aesthetic of the old movies, because I'm sure there were people that are arguing like, oh no, there's got to be holograms and lens flare. Like, no, these are ships operated by switches, knobs, and dials, damn it, because that's the way they look. And whoever made that decision should be kept there, unless somehow that was also Kathleen Kennedy, because in that case the evil she's done far cancels that out. But I'm just saying, because if you look at the Star Trek reboot, and even like Strange New Worlds, the other shows, like they look futuristic. They look like the future of the original series. Like if you were to take their vision of the future, is what that looks like now, instead of trying to copy that look, which is what they should have done, because the other shows aren't going anywhere, in my opinion.
But there's something with the practical models that just looks a lot better. I mean, again, I go back to the Wrath of Khan, the scene when Reliant just rips into the side of the Enterprise. It looks like something actually being shot. The burns, the damage. That's what
or like like the bird of prey explosion shot. Like you can tell that's a real physical thing blowing up. You can tell that's not pixels. Like that's a real model being blown to bits.
I mean,
isn't there an episode of the Deep Space Nine that's like the last episode that they used models on, and they just used like all of them essentially and blew most of them up in the process? It's one of the big battles. I don't think it's the big battle over Cardassia. I think it's one involving the Klingons. But someone was talking about it one day, and I never did figure out which episode it is, but I think it's one of those. It's the last one that uses models. And then from that point forward, Deep Space Nine uses CGI.
Now, I do know there is an episode, I think it's the Next Generation, where they're at a scrap yard, and they're floating space, and half of the models in that are prototype models for different ships that they didn't go for years.
That's the episode where the Romulans are going to invade Vulcan. They've got ships hidden there or something, or they've been taking ships from there because they know no one's going to miss them. Yeah.
But anyways, practical models look good. I mean, obviously, like I said, there was a couple of things, especially like in the motion picture, where they tried to make it look like you could see from the outside of the ship, looking into a shuttlecraft to see Scotty and Kirk in it.
I mean, nothing's perfect. Like I know I've mentioned it in another video on here. I just don't remember which one. But we've talked about Terminator 2. Terminator 2, all kinds of fantastic special effects throughout the movie. And then there's that scene where they're driving at night. It's a steer-jerker scene. They're in the cop car, and it's clearly the fake background, like a 1950s car chase. And it's like, man, James Cameron, did you just like run out of money at that point? Or is that one of those like, it's worked for 100 years in movies? No reason to fix this. We got liquid metal guys to make. So no, nothing's perfect.
And I say the other one is that they used a lot of matte paintings in the first movie, the motion picture. They weren't quite up to the quality of what Star Wars had with their matte paintings. Because there was a time where I'm looking at some of the Star Wars stuff and I'm like, that's a matte painting. That looks like an actual set. Versus here, there were a couple of ones that were like, that's a little. But then the special effects that they've done in some of the other ones, like there's ones where they made like an entire set out of putting stuff closer to the camera and having people stand at a certain spot to give the illusion that there's this entire elaborate scene that they're standing in, but really they're just standing in a room with a bunch of crap in front of the camera.
Well, I mean,
it works.
Now, if you want to see some terrible matte painting stuff, watch the movie Hawk the Slayer sometime. Like, there's like the matte painting, and then it's like a person like moving, and it does not work at all. Like, not at all.
What was that?
Not nearly as bad as the glowing bouncy ball of doom scene, or the guy that got killed with silly string. But I did a whole video on that, folks. You should watch it, in case I forget to link to it up here. But check it out.
Well, we're...
Yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to say on the movies.
So we got 2 hours in on this, just about.
All right.
So, if you guys can sit through and listen to all this, definitely comment on it.
I'll probably break it up in editing. So.
And even then, if they won't watch part 1, part 2, or if we break it into 6 parts.
Yeah, I'll probably. Well, folks, depending on how you're watching this, I have either broken it up per movie or per like chunks of time or something. or I have just let it go, because there's one really long video we did one time that I broke up into 3 parts, but then I also posted just the whole full length thing. I'll get it right here in a second. And that might be what I do here. I might post the individual segments and then post the full length with the timestamps or something. But at any rate, if you're watching the full length one, or if you just watched one of the others, or since I'm probably just going to take this scene right here and slap it at the end of each of the videos, so I don't have to record this 6 times. It's a little editing trick for those who don't know. Thank you for watching. Definitely comment down the bottom. Do you want to see more of us talking about the others? Any particular part of these you might want to know more about? Want to know about like other random movies that DeForest Kelly, Leonard Nimoy, or William Shatner are in by any chance? We can talk about Night of the Lepus. You want to hear about giant rabbits terrorizing Texas? I think it's Texas.
Or if you want to know more about obscure video formats like the one shown here,
I'll be able to dig up a Betamax somewhere. But yeah, just let us know. You want to hear about the other Star Trek stuff? Once Strange New World Season 2 comes out, we'll probably do a video once all the episodes are out. We might do weekly things, but that's probably a little taxing on our schedule. So we'll probably do a wrap-up once they're all out. But otherwise, thanks again for watching. Comment. But otherwise, like, share, subscribe, all that fun YouTube stuff. But otherwise, make it so.
Engage.
Engage, that's better. We'll go with that.